When I say a company is the most dangerous weapons manufacturer in Star Wars, you may think I'm talking about Kuat Drive Yards as the company responsible for much of the Imperial fleet. Or maybe you even think of Mandel Motors, with its Mandalorian operators being often available for hire alongside their vessels. But no, the most dangerous weapons developers in the Star Wars galaxy, whether it's Legends or canon, although most of our information today comes from Legends, are without a doubt the Colicoid creation nest of Calla 4, an organization of insects who are as likely to eat you as they are to take your contract. The Colicoid creation nest was best known for its battle droid designs, although they were also sometimes involved in the design and manufacturing of either small starfighters like the droid Tri-Fighter, and boarding craft like the Drakh and the Trident-type vessels used by the CIS during the Clone Wars. The Colicoids themselves were described in the Ultimate Alien Anthology as highly intelligent, emotionless, and cannibalistic. Like most insectoid species, they were organized into different hives or nests under queens, who differed from the typical warriors by being even larger and having a tail with a stinger. Queen Colicoids were among some of the most skilled fighters of the Colicoid nests, though they typically didn't fight themselves unless the young were directly threatened. Their violent tendencies towards outsiders were typically put aside in the even more ruthless pursuit of economic enterprise, offering their skills as droid smiths for outside groups. As a planet in the Inner Rim, it's likely that Calla 4 had long been known to and part of galactic society, although the Colicoids themselves typically didn't leave the planet. The first time period where we have specific information about their activities was in the Old Republic MMO, about 3.5 millennia before the Empire, where the Farnell Research Facility was established on the planet Balmorra, studying and experimenting with Colicoid DNA to create weaponized versions of the insects. When the Sith invaded Balmorra, the mutated Colicoids were freed and overran the facility, forming what was known as Bugtown, while Sesic, the representative of the Creation Nest on Balmorra, offered a potential alliance between the Creation Nest and the Sith, who agreed to like this video and subscribe for more. The Colicoid creations often reflected their own appearance, which was also often described as off-putting, although they sometimes got inspiration from other inhabitants of Calla. Most famous of their creations was the droideka, named by taking the word droid from basic and adding eka or hireling from their own language. The capability of the droideka to roll into a ball and move around was based on the Colicoids' own bodies, which could curl up defensively and speed away as a protective measure against predators like the fearsome Hwech. Some sources differ at least a little bit on the droideka's development. The official fact file claims it was developed specifically for the Trade Federation. Some other sources say it already existed and the Trade Federation just bought some, although you could split the difference here and say the fact file was referring to the specific variants used by the Trade Federation, which, at least by the time of Naboo, were less independent than the droidekas used on Calla. At least the implication is that they already existed. In any case, while the Colicoids were interested in galactic commerce, their deals didn't always involve getting credits for their work. The exclusivity deal the Trade Federation negotiated with the Colicoids involved a payment of 50 barges full of meat in exchange for their droideka. That sounds like it could go pretty rancid pretty fast, so hopefully this was all paid in installments. These kinds of deals, though, could sometimes be as dangerous to negotiate for the buyer as the droids could be for their intended targets. Going to Calla directly was essentially asking to get eaten, although the Colicoids would at least try to exhibit some kind of restraint during the business meetings. Sometimes, though, you just get hungry, who hasn't been there, and they can't help themselves, leading to a tendency for only unscrupulous organizations with little regard to their own personnel to be the biggest clients for the Colicoids, since they don't really care if their representatives have a chance to get eaten. In the Millennium Falcon novel, a Gossam named Lusan accompanies a smuggler named Reg Tant to a meeting with the Colicoids to purchase some surplus buzz droids, also a Colicoid project, although this time based on a different type of insect on Calla rather than the Colicoids themselves. Lusan ends up being eaten despite the pair's attempt to bring some other meat as a distraction from their own delicious flesh. This habit of eating clients, and especially non-clients, led to many diplomatic incidents for the Colicoids, so a lot of time was spent trying to negotiate peace between themselves and the compatriots of those they devoured. It also likely contributed to their often adversarial relationship with the Jedi. Also frustrating for clients was the fact that Colicoids would try to back out of firm deals if they no longer felt like they were able to benefit from them. Although to be fair, at least for negotiators, on the list of reasons not to work with the Colicoids, this probably ends up a bit lower than the whole chance to be eaten thing. But despite all of these difficulties in coexisting with the rest of galactic society, the Colicoids were officially granted Senate representation sometime following the Battle of Naboo. Like many other industrialized insect nests in the Clone Wars, the Colicoids supported the Confederacy, supplying more droidekas, many buzz droids repurposed from their salvage and repair functions into being shipborne pests, the droid tri-fighter, the boarding shuttles mentioned earlier, and a bunch of other things. But some of the Colicoids' most powerful creations were kept primarily for their own use. This included the Scorponok Annihilator droid, which was too expensive to see widespread deployment. It was thought that under 100 of these incredibly powerful droids existed at one time maximum. Rather than being deployed throughout the galaxy, most of these droids were just kept on Kola to defend the planet against potential Republic invasion. Their defensive and offensive systems were similar to the droidekas but scaled way up. They had the same strong bronzium armor, as well as an even bigger version of the personal bubble shield. This increased size allowed droidekas to be stationed inside of the Scorponok shield and fire out along with the Scorponok's own powerful cannons. All of this combined to make the Scorponoks both very powerful and very difficult to assault. When the Republic finally did invade Kola, a single Scorponok was able to take out 3 platoons of clone troopers. The Republic had only brought 4 platoons, so the invasion was abandoned. Despite this focus on home defense, after the defense of Kola, the Colicoids agreed to have several of the droids shipped out to the front lines, while the CIS fleet took up planetary defense duties, covering for the exporting of these Scorponoks. Tales of Scorponok effectiveness may be at least a little bit exaggerated. They were said to be able to destroy up to a dozen ATTEs each, but even if some of these specific capabilities were exaggerated, Separatist victories at planets like Polani and Formos were heavily attributed to the presence of Scorponok droids. This is the same type of droid we also see used by the Hutts in the canon Book of Boba Fett series. In Legends, while some droids did end up in private hands, the majority were taken in by the Empire for study, with some of them being sent to Biss to protect the Emperor's secret facilities. When it came to some of their smaller creations like the droideka and especially the buzz droids, there were absolutely no shortage of them, and they definitely ended up in pretty much everyone's hands. Thanks to their cooperation with the CIS during the Clone Wars, the Colicoids faced similar penalties to other droid manufacturers, being legally barred from the creation of new battle droids. The creation nests as a whole were entirely disbanded. When the Empire fell and the time limit expired for the ban on battle droids galaxy-wide, the Colicoids remained barred from production while others resumed their weapons development. Nobody was particularly eager to see the Colicoids rearm except themselves, and they ended up in a protracted legal battle to re-establish their right to resume the manufacture of weapons. They were successful, and the creation nests were reformed with the cooperation of Kola Arpak Automata. We don't know exactly what they built after this point, but it was probably similarly creepy to their earlier stuff. That's all for today's video on the history of the galaxy's most dangerous weapon developers. Thank you for watching, I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if there's another topic you'd like to see covered in the future, and special thanks to Marmar for editing this video.